Welcome everyone. Just give me a second to connect up. It is absolutely lovely to welcome you to this morning's webinar. We're really excited to have you here. We're going to be looking at the whole area of degree apprenticeships through the lens of 3 different reports that Edge has been involved in over recent months, including our latest one published today. We'll be putting links in the chat as we go as well. And we're recording today so that you can watch this again, you can share it with colleagues. We've got the Q&A function and the chat enabled, so feel free to pop questions that you might have for our various speakers and panelists into the Q&A as we go, and I'll try and pick as many of those up as we possibly can. And do feel free to say hello in the chat. We want to make it as informal as we can as well. Let us know where you're from, let us know any reflections. That would be fantastic. So yeah, degree apprenticeships are dear to my heart, and I know to many of yours as well. I was over at the Department of Education in my previous job when they got started, as I know was one of our panelists, Mandy Crawford, today as well. So it's really great to see them kind of coming to fruition and getting to a stage where we're looking at and evaluating and seeing how they're going. At Edge, this research work is really important to us as well, led by Andrea Laczik, who's going to be speaking in just a moment. Our research team has been doing some fantastic work recently, including on T-levels at the end of last year, and of course today on degree apprenticeships. So what we're going to do today, we're going to hear from Andrea and then from 2 of our colleagues from Sheffield Hallam about the 3 different reports that have been published recently, and then we'll have a panel discussion to pick up some of the kind of key points and reflections on those. So without further ado, congratulations, Andrea, on the publication today and all the team that's been involved. I'd like to ask you to present first about Edge's report.
Thank you very much, Olly. I am hoping to share, which I could just now. Now I can't see the default. Olly, would you mind sharing yours?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I've got it now. It was a separate, yeah.
Great, we can see that. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay? Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. I'm really pleased that this research report is out this morning, and thank you all the colleagues who have helped me getting here. I'm going to talk very briefly today, really just give you a taster of what we have in this report, and we are going to focus on what we can learn from the experiences of the apprentices, employers, and education and training providers. So it's a taster, and I would like to also thank to our collaborators from the University of Bath, Huddersfield and Oxford, and you will see all the names at the end of the presentation, and you're welcome to contact anybody in the team. So very briefly, I will do a short introduction to degree apprenticeships just to make sure that everybody is on the same page, and we may have international colleagues who would like to have a short overview. I'm going to then talk about some of the main findings, not everything because it's a long report and we covered a lot in there. And I will base the examples on the experiences of the different stakeholders and illustrate with many quotations. So the 3 themes I'm hoping to cover today quickly is the awareness of degree apprenticeship, supporting SMEs and work-based learning, and I hope to conclude. So degree apprenticeships were launched in 2015-16. It's a relatively new qualification. It's going to be 10 years old this year. And it's funded through the apprenticeship levy, which was introduced 2017. And that was really the end of employers' voluntary contribution to education and training. Apprentices are employees, so they have employees' rights, and they must spend within this program at least 6 hours per week on average of formal on-the-job training. Degree apprenticeship work towards full bachelor's and master degrees, level 6 and level 7. Currently, over 100 universities engage with degree apprenticeships across 17 sectors. This is
Andrea, sorry to interrupt you. There's we're just seeing it in presenter mode at the moment. I think it's the 4th icon, which looks like a little screen at the bottom to switch modes, if that's possible. If not, I can share mine.
Perhaps then please do share, because I don't know
No
what's
problem at all.
happening.
You continue, I'll do that.
Apologies.
There we are. Please go ahead, Andrea.
Okay, sorry about this. I hope it was not too. Okay, so this is a model where employers are in the driving seat, which means that standards are developed by trailblazer employer groups, and the programs are designed by training providers based on these standards. Originally, the primary target age group was 18, 19-year-olds, offer them an alternative route to gain a degree. However, as we know, substantial number of existing employees got onto the degree apprenticeship program who are 25-year-olds and over. Now, degree apprenticeships, there were considerable expectations for degree apprenticeships. Just to mention a few, they should contribute to filling local skill shortages, national economic growth, supporting widening participation, contributing to a more diverse workforce, offering social mobility, and so on. So I'm not going through the extent to which degree apprenticeships have fulfilled these expectations, but please read the report. Next slide, please. Very quickly, just two sets of statistics, which I think is interesting and important. The first one is looking at level 6 and level 7 according to sector. And I think it is important, especially level 7, because they are very similar in terms of numbers, and there are changes to the level 7 funding arrangement. Next slide, please. It's also important to look at level 6, 7 apprenticeship starts by age group. We all know that originally degree apprenticeship was targeted the 18, 19-year-olds, but on this slide you can see that there is considerably larger apprenticeship starts in the older age groups, but overall it has been increasing over time, even though the numbers are still small. Next, please. So very quickly about the research methodology. As I said, we have looked at how degree apprenticeships are perceived and experienced by the different stakeholders, and I hope I can give you a flavor today. We had just under 100 interviewees participating in this research, and we used the software NVivo to thematically analyze the data. Next slide, please. So first of all, I thought I would flag up knowing about degree apprenticeship and the importance of it. If there is a lack of communication about the existence of the degree apprenticeships in general, that would definitely make the pool of potential interested stakeholders smaller. Schools are still, I'm not going to read out the bubbles, they are all quotations from our interviews. So schools are still mainly offering information, advice, and guidance about the academic route going to university and expecting young people to apply through UCAS. Now, data was collected before UCAS put degree apprenticeships on the web, so you will have to be aware of that. A lot of the people get to know about degree apprenticeships by chance. This is the green bubble, and it also comes down often to personal contacts like family members and peers who know about degree apprenticeships. Can I have the next slide, please? So engaging with degree apprenticeship is one thing, completing degree apprenticeships is another, and all stakeholders, apprentices and employers and education training providers require considerable detailed information and clarity what they engage with. So the apprentices reflecting how important it would be to know in advance about the day-to-day life of an apprenticeship and what it would look like. This is especially important for those people who have caring responsibilities. Can I please have the next slide? We also came across with occasions where we felt that there have been misconceptions about knowing of degree apprenticeship, and maybe it also links to knowing the benefits of degree apprenticeships. So, for example, one employer is talking about losing someone for 20% of the time. We consider that as a misunderstanding and probably not recognizing the importance of the job training that the degree apprentice has to engage with. But similarly, young people were reflecting that they were told that they really will not add value to the company until they complete the degree. And we again consider that this is not necessarily true, as we have previous also research suggesting that often degree apprentices as employees contribute from day one to the businesses. Can I have the next slide, please? So another theme which we also looked at is what kind of support and how SMEs can be supported to engage with degree apprenticeships. I mean, clearly, as one of our interviewees suggested, that the system is more in favor of large employers rather than SMEs. Large employers do have the capacity and resources to contribute to education and training. They are more likely to engage in trailblazer groups when they develop standards. So all this suggests that the system is geared for large employers. This is similarly reflected in the bottom quotation by an SME who is again considering a loss when the degree apprentice is on off-the-job training. But it all comes down to resources and the importance for an SME to keep their business profitable. Can I have the next slide, please? So SMEs need targeted support. There are education training providers, it's the black bubble, where they make special effort to engage with SMEs in curriculum development. In this way, the curriculum is tailored more to the needs of the particular SME. So this is very important because they see the value of engaging with the program. Education and training providers also showed examples how they connect multinational employers with leftover levy money with SMEs, and also provide support to SMEs with the administrative burden they often experience. SMEs very often came across with levy transfer schemes through existing connections, networks, and chance. I mean, it is also very important, especially looking from the SME's perspective, have a network of employers in order to offer a broad breadth of experiences to their degree apprentices, which is often not possible given their size. But we also have to be aware that when engaging with SMEs, education training providers engaging with SMEs also causes complexities and not necessarily quite a resource-heavy exercise. So like one of the training providers, that's the bottom quotation, says, trying to pedal back from working with SMEs because it's so expensive, so hard to get hold of. We have a lot of SMEs on our books. If you ask me, do I want any more? The answer is no. So there is a lot of work to be done supporting SMEs in order for them to engage. Next slide, please. Okay, very briefly, I would like to go through degree apprenticeships as work-based learning opportunity. Work-based learning requires very specific conditions in order to be effective. And this includes strong partnerships between employers and training providers, staff who are delivering degree apprenticeships should be up to date with industry developments, and also a robust support mechanism for degree apprenticeships, such as mentoring. Very clear that work-based learning as such is attractive to young people, and almost all our apprentice interviewees engaged with degree apprenticeship because of the work-based learning element and linking on-the-job and off-the-job training and theory and practice. Can I have the next slide, please? So combining theory and practice is key. There are a couple of examples on this slide where apprentices are experiencing this link. They are all suggesting that this works well, how the task given on the job links to the work they are doing at the university. But I think in the essence, the bottom, the green bubble really summarizes very well that this is the opportunity to learn the theory, apply it, evaluate it, ask questions, come back to it, practice it, and develop skills. And this was all considered as an important aspect. Can I have the next slide, please? There are different models and approaches how degree apprenticeship programs were delivered, and some of them were more theory-based. One ETP called it front-loaded, conceptual, technical, and procedural content. And later on, degree apprentices moved to project-based activities. The pink bubble nicely exemplifies how this can work well. So every module you do in the university explicitly maps to a project you would be doing in the workplace. So just very quickly, and I will wrap it up in a minute, I think the quotations which I picked really suggest good and positive experiences of degree apprentices with degree apprenticeships. However, I also have to say that experiences that apprentices reported, and you can find in the report, are mixed. So not everything necessarily works as we wish it would. And can I have the last slide, please? it's really just a summary as I started at the beginning. This is just a taster, and I wanted to pick up three themes from our report. All three are linked to recommendations. So one is the level of knowledge and understanding about degree apprenticeships is very variable and is not helped by the complexity of the system. So there is clear communication needed about degree apprenticeships. It's also important to provide direct and tailored information, advice, and support to SMEs, and making sure that they engage and the program is tailored to their needs and they get sufficient support with levy transfer and all the other administrative burden they might experience. And the last one is the importance of work-based learning that requires strong partnership between training providers and employers, the importance of teaching staff who should have up-to-date industry experience, and there has to be a robust support mechanism for degree apprentices in order to complete and gain their degree. And the last slide, please. And thank you very much. I'll stop here, and I again would like to thank the research team who supported and contributed to this piece of research.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That's great. And yeah, lots to be proud of the degree apprenticeship program there, but also some great kind of constructive challenges around things to tweak and improve as well, which is very much the kind of theme of this work. As we pop the link in the chat to the full report, it's well worth having a look at the recommendations there as well, and we'll come back to some of these themes as we go through. Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to welcome Charlynne Pullen next to the virtual stage, who's Principal Research Fellow at Sheffield Hallam. And Charlynne's going to be talking about the recent report that she and the team collaborated with Edge on around widening participation in degree apprenticeships. Charlynne, over to you.
Thanks. Just give me 1 second. This never quite works as you think it's going to, does it? Okay, right. Fab. Okay, hopefully you've got all that.
Yeah, we can see that. Thanks, Charlynne.
Perfect. So I wanted to talk to you about this small research project that we did with the Edge Foundation on degree apprenticeships, but specifically looking at it from a widening participation perspective. So it was a small piece of research conducted together. It was a specific kind of case study approach. So we really looked at it from the university perspective, and we were looking at 3 different types of staff in each institution, the kind of outreach, people looking at outreach and widening participation specifically, those looking at employer engagement and recruitment of degree apprentices, and those kind of looking at policy and strategy at the institution, particularly around access and participation plans. So I've given you a little bit of information about some of the degree apprentices as we go through. But I think one of the key things that I wanted to kind of focus on or kind of mention at the beginning, and Andrea kind of picked this up in the work that they've been doing, is the focus on employers as recruiters. So universities really felt that although they were doing quite a lot in terms of outreach, and I'll come to that in a second, that employers were really kind of recruiting the degree apprentices. So they were, in order to be an apprentice, of course, you needed a contract of employment. So they were really in control of the situation. So it was specifically about employers' priorities when they were thinking about recruiting a degree apprentice, whether it was upskilling existing staff or kind of taking on a new recruit. And although, you know, as Andrea's mentioned, the kind of focus on SMEs from government, that actually it's kind of new recruits in big cohorts, while kind of in some cases SMEs are looking to upskill existing staff. But fundamentally, employers are making the offer to a degree apprentice, and the university is approving that that individual is capable of completing a degree with them. So in terms of who was recruited, so I've done a couple of slides on kind of profile of degree apprentices. So these are the 2 universities, as I mentioned, that we kind of looked at as case studies, and they sent us some data, anonymised of course, on the degree apprentices. So as you can see that for both institutions, one was a larger institution, one was a smaller institution, and they have quite a different kind of industry and sector focus. That for both types of institution, the majority of their degree apprentices had the level 3 as their highest prior qualification, with around 20% having a degree or a kind of higher qualification before starting. Despite this, maths and English was a bit of a concern. Both universities were having to provide additional support to some apprentices who didn't have English and maths GCSE. Now, again, as Andrea's mentioned, the kind of focus on degree apprentices initially was a kind of 18 to 19 age group, but actually most of those degree apprentices are older. And I think one of the key kind of splits, if you like, is around 25. What we found was that the variation was often incredibly kind of led by the subject. So older staff tended to be in more health related programs, often because this was the NHS or other providers who wanted to upskill existing staff rather than, you know, kind of finding it easier to do that than to recruit new starters, whereas employers in kind of digital and engineering programs were really kind of a bit more used to apprentices as a kind of concept and were kind of looking at new recruits. One of the key things though is that the older apprentices were actually less likely to have parents who went to university than the younger apprentices, and in one case, in one university, were less likely to have parents who went to university than the kind of standard intake for full-time undergraduate programs, which suggests that actually the mature students, when we're thinking about widening participation, might have more of a kind of a WP focus, even if that isn't the kind of intention necessarily. It's not specifically targeted, it's just kind of the situation that people in, those kind of people not necessarily having the opportunity to go to university the first time round. And just a bit more detail on the age, and this kind of University 1 is very much about the health programs, where they were looking at kind of existing staff who'd already worked, particularly in the NHS for some years, wanting to upskill to kind of more professional healthcare roles. So 3 of the kind of key elements in the research. One, as I mentioned, we spoke to outreach people. So the focus on kind of outreach for degree apprentices versus outreach for kind of more traditional undergraduate programs, that typically degree apprentices were not central to university outreach, and often because degree apprenticeships make up kind of 5 to 10% of provision, often even in universities with large kind of degree apprenticeship cohorts, but there is a growing demand for information about them, particularly kind of schools and colleges who were thinking about, who were kind of the high achieving schools. So both of our universities that we that were kind of part of the research were kind of applied universities, post-92 institutions, and one mentioned that they were invited to a school that they'd never been invited to before, specifically to talk about degree apprenticeships, while a local Russell Group provider was asked instead to talk about going to university. So there was a clear kind of perception of what was going on in terms of who degree apprenticeships might be kind of targeted at. But despite that, there are significant barriers for young applicants to degree apprenticeships. There are often high entry requirements, not just, they're high entry requirements because, as well as being able to be kind of accepted by the university for the degree, you also have to be kind of capable of being employed by the employer. So this is kind of 2-stage application process and entry requirement, rather than the 1-stage application process that is kind of going to university. We also kind of heard from universities that private schools were much better at kind of preparing their students for assessment centres for degree apprenticeships at large employers. And that fed through into the awareness of degree apprenticeships. So some of the kind of similar themes to the project that Andrea was talking about, but particularly from a kind of university perspective, as I mentioned, those kind of private schools or high achieving schools being much more proactive about utilising the benefits of degree apprenticeships. And, you know, we also heard about kind of some working class families rejecting degree apprenticeships and preferring undergraduate programmes from the kind of outreach teams that had been going out from universities. But there are also kind of misconceptions about the challenge of becoming a degree apprentice, the idea that you are both studying and working at the same time is quite challenging, particularly for an 18-year-old that maybe hasn't had a job before. The kind of combination of doing those two things that where they feed in together. Of course, we know many kind of full-time undergraduates may work part-time, but the job is not necessarily central to their degree. So kind of, you know, an understanding of how the kind of degree apprenticeships work, and of course the idea that degree apprentices are of course employees and not just students. So in terms of supporting degree apprentices on programme, because, you know, particularly where they were mature students, they're more likely to have kind of personal family responsibilities, but they also kind of more generally engage with the university in a different way, being kind of less frequently on campus, kind of, you know, identifying more as a kind of employee and a member of staff at their workplace than a kind of student. And so in many cases, there were kind of different challenges for universities in terms of supporting these students and making sure they were aware of all of the kind of, you know, mental health, etc. support that was available to them, even kind of joining sports teams and things like that. It wasn't something that apprentices saw as necessarily central to their kind of student experience. And so finally, just to conclude, the research that we did kind of supported the idea that degree apprentices can widen participation, but specifically if we're thinking about widening participation for mature students and kind of part-time students who may have been in work already, so those kind of with existing prior work experience. On the flip side of that, the young degree apprentices don't necessarily come from as diverse backgrounds as those on full-time undergraduate programs. And again, you know, thinking about this from a university perspective, the university isn't necessarily in control of recruitment. They're not able to kind of push specific targets or kind of encourage particular groups of individuals in quite the same way, because the employer decides kind of who they are recruited. And equally around the outreach, increasingly there isn't necessarily a direct link between outreach and recruitment because of the kind of employer role, in the same way that there is a kind of a much more direct link between outreach and recruitment for kind of full-time undergraduate programs. And finally, those are all of the contacts of our staff team there, and I will stop sharing now, if that's all right.
Thank you so much, Charlynne. That was absolutely great, and some really important messages that kind of supported what Andrea was saying there. So we're starting to see some themes emerging across those two, which I suspect we'll continue to see in just a moment. Great. I just want to welcome our final presenters onto the stage. So Amy France and Claire Staniland are from the School of Health and Social Care, also at Sheffield Hallam, and their report, Collaborating with Edge, has been looking at effective work-based mentoring through the lens of their area of work. So over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say hello and then let Amy pick up with the slides because we've not got very long. So yeah, Claire Staniland. I'm Associate Head in the School of Health and Social Care, look after academic partnerships and run an Assistant Practitioner Apprenticeship. But like I say, I'll let Amy pick up and go through our slides.
Thank you. Claire, can you see the slides okay? Oh, okay, thanks. Morning, my name is Amy France. So I'm Associate Head of School for School of Health and Social Care with responsibility for apprenticeships, Sheffield Hallam University. So Claire, myself and some of the colleagues worked on this project. So I'll just show you who was involved in the project. So it was a collaboration with Edge. And the topic that we wanted to look at was work-based mentors. So what we wanted to explore was really understanding what are work-based mentors' perceptions and expectations of the role. And this was a specific health focus, but what we believe is that the results are transferable across many sectors. What we really wanted to understand was the perceptions and expectations of work-based mentors in supporting degree apprentices, and then highlight areas of practice that we can then transfer across other areas so that our learning can inform the work-based mentor role and how we can support that going forwards. So the rationale for our study then was that ultimately, a lot of research recognised the importance of work-based mentors, but there's a real lack of clarity of what the work-based mentor role is in terms of the definition of it, frameworks, and how that is implemented. So we wanted to explore what the research was around the role of the work-based mentor, and particularly in health and within allied health professions. There is a lot of expertise already in the role of the practice educator. Now, a practice educator tends to be someone that works and supervises a student on placement for a discrete period of time. And what they're looking at is assessing their competency. Now, we recognise the work-based mentor is very different from that role. And so a lot of our mentors are expecting something very similar. What a lot of the research suggests really is that we're not just thinking about clinical competency. And actually the role of the work-based mentor is not a discrete period of time. You're supporting someone right from that starting point all the way through to their endpoint assessment. And so the expectations and the role should be very different. So Roberts, Storm and Flynn, they did some work in 2019. They recognised that actually there's more of a pastoral wellbeing element that a mentor needs to impart really on their apprentice. And that there is that huge focus about supporting achievement of the apprenticeship standard, and those KSBs, which is very different from that practice educator role, which is about clinical competencies. And they reinforce that the difference with the work-based mentor role is not just about that competency, but it's about facilitating, supporting learning opportunities in the workplace. And they talk about that social activity in the workplace, and also encouraging those support networks. And so ultimately the role of the work-based mentor is multifactorial. You know, there's lots of things around sharing knowledge and experience, and that needs to be considered. But again, there isn't any clear guidance on what that actually means. Kind of ran, I think, 2009, Rowe, 2017, lots of people recognise the importance of the work-based mentor role, and that the collaboration between HEIs and employees is really important. But again, there's no guidance on how that should be offered, what training packages are needed, and ultimately what are the skills required for a work-based mentor role. So this is why I wanted to do this. Particularly the health focus was from the NHS long-term plan, really reinforcing the need for apprenticeships, particularly around training, retaining, reforming. The emphasis was that we should be increasing apprenticeships and training healthcare practitioners by 2031. So there's a real emphasis on these apprenticeships, but if we're going to do that, we need to do that well, and we need to understand the role of the work-based mentor and how they influence success. So our methodology then is, this was part of a 5-phase kind of study that we are doing. So this was phase 1, obviously Edge supported us with this, and it was purposive sampling. We conducted 8 online semi-structured interviews between the 5th of December, 21st of December in 2023. And we used a thematic analysis approach to analyse the data, obviously using a Brown and Clark's approach to how we conduct thematic analysis. These were allied health professionals, so they were physiotherapy and occupational therapy work-based mentors. Now, the reason for that is that this was our longest running programme, apprenticeship programmes at Sheffield Hallam University. So we started those in 2019. So we used the more experienced of the work-based mentors for this. The next phase is that we will start to look more across allied health professions. So we have got more programmes on board now, so we want to look across and then be able to pick out if there are any themes specific to each profession, any similarities, differences. And then we want to triangulate our findings with the apprentice view and the employee view. So does what the work-based mentor think and perceive collaborate with what the apprentice and the employer, line managers, apprentice leads all think about the role? The findings of our results then were that kind of 3 key areas came out of our findings. the benefits of the role. So there were some a lot of perceptions around the huge benefits of the role of the work-based mentor, and in particular 3 key areas was to the apprentice themselves, to the work-based mentor, and to the wider community. So I'll elaborate on those in a moment. Obviously, they were recognised there were challenges of the role, and a lot of this was around that lack of clarity and expectations, what actually is a work-based mentor role, but how somebody was prepared for that role and supported along their journey. And obviously, within the NHS, we know that winter pressures, but all the time there are consistent, pressures on our staff. And so ultimately there are organisational resource challenges, which I'm sure are familiar in areas outside the NHS as well. What they did say was that there were some enablers of the role, and they recognised that there were certain interpersonal attributes or professional skills and knowledge that was needed to be a successful work-based mentor. So I'll just elaborate on those a little bit more. But in terms of benefits of the role then of the work-based mentor, what the mentors themselves told us was that they recognised that it was a two-way learning process. So they felt that they really benefited themselves from the role of a work-based mentor. So not only did they see the progression in the apprentice, and they enjoyed and found that nurturing and rewarding to see this apprentice progress, particularly if it was upskilling and they'd seen somebody who they thought would have made a really good qualified practitioner, and they were able to facilitate and support that journey. They recognised that that was really rewarding for themselves. And they benefited by educating and supporting that individual. They learned a lot themselves in that journey. But they also recognised that the contribution that made to the workplace. So having this apprentice that was upskilled and not just at the end of their journey, but all the way through, they were able to contribute, make workplace impact, was impacting on their service, on their organisation in terms of challenges, in terms of pressures, in terms of their role and their contribution. So they recognised that was really significant. And this correlates to a lot of what the research already says around the fact that there's got to be this mutual respect between the mentor and the mentee, and that a lot of kind of work by Parson Ray suggests that there is an impact on organisational strategic goals by having apprentices, but it was interesting that the work-based mentors perceived that themselves as well. Challenges of the role, what the work-based mentors told us were that they felt underprepared for the role. And this was from all aspects really, that they weren't clear in terms of the expectations of the role, how long it might take, what how much they were supposed to meet with the individual. So we'll kind of organisational things, but also just what the principle was, and that was support. They felt that they didn't get enough support from HEIs, but also from their employer as well, and that wasn't triangulated. So they weren't really clear initially of what they were supposed to be doing. A lot of mentors said that as time progressed, they felt that they started to understand the role, but they didn't feel overly prepared at the beginning. They did recognise that their role changed, and that it did become more pastoral as the role progressed, and they got to know their mentor. As they got to know their apprentice a little bit more, and that changed the amount of time and the requirement that they needed, and so maybe the potential training needed to change as well at those points. A lot of what they said was that they felt they didn't quite get the support from their organisation, and that they didn't get the recognition of their role and the time to be able to do their role successfully as well. In terms of enablers of the role, what the mentors told us was that there was a huge motivation for the role. Now, we did have a mixture of mentors. Some who've been forced into the role, some who'd volunteered for the role. But what they all said was that they did ultimately enjoy the role, and they were motivated to be able to do that once they'd been allocated this role. They felt that the best interpersonal attributes and what made them more successful in their role were those pastoral elements of being nurturing, caring, having patience, but understanding the apprenticeship, understanding the requirements of the apprenticeship standard, and being able to facilitate those learning opportunities, but in a supportive environment, and that it was important that it was all supportive, and not that, as we mentioned earlier on, as a practice educator, not necessarily that assessment and the criticality of performance all the time. Again, this links with some of the research that is already existing around the role of practice educators, but also of mentors, and that it does depend on that individual and the attributes that they exhibit, and that will impact on whether the role is successful or not. What they also did reinforce is that enablers for the role is the importance of having time to be able to do their role successfully. So having the time to prepare, having the time to understand what they're doing, and having the time to meet with that apprentice and really discuss the learner's progress and understand them as an individual, so they can then create that individualized approach for their apprentice. Thanks. So ultimately, our conclusions, it really demonstrated that there was huge positivity around the role of the work-based mentor. There are benefits that the work-based mentors perceive to themselves as an individual in terms of their learning, to the apprentice, to the organisation and their service. But there are some barriers, and that is around time, understanding of the role. They would have liked more preparation, more support early on in their role. They think that there are certain attributes that make them successful, and these align with a lot of research around that pastoral element of the work-based mentor role. Our recommendations from this really, and our learning from this, is that although this is within a health and allied health profession setting, that ultimately the work-based mentor role is really vital. We know that it has a huge impact on success of the apprentice, because the majority of time is in the workplace. There needs to be more time and preparation allowed for work-based mentors to understand their role and to be able to prepare for that. So we are trying to encourage professional bodies to think about their guidance, support and recognition of work-based mentor roles. So are there any guidance, standards, frameworks, guidelines, or any accreditation that might be able to come out to support and recognise the vital role that the work-based mentor plays? But ultimately, if not, HEIs and employers need to work together to support the mentors, and by creating a community practice, then that might be a way forward of allowing work-based mentors to come together, to have that forum to share good practice and to learn from each other. And that might be a really successful way of them feeling a bit more prepared and having the opportunity to discuss things, but all the way through the apprenticeship, not just at the beginning, but as the role changes, they have the opportunity to do that all the way through to the end of their course. And that is all. So thank you. If there's any questions?
That's great. Thank you so much, Amy, Claire. That's absolutely great. What a rich set of presentations and loads of similar messages coming out of them again as well, which is brilliant. What we're going to do next, I'm going to invite two fantastic colleagues with a lot of practical experience in this area to join me just to reflect on some of the messages, and then we'll bring the researchers back on at the end as well in case people have got kind of broader questions. So Mandy, Sharon, I'm going to come to each of you just to say hello, introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your involvement in Degree Apprenticeships so far, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation about your experience and how it lines up with some of the findings here. So Sharon, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Thanks, Ollie. Yes, some great research and reports. I am hoping my internet holds that because I've changed locations of where I was originally. I have been involved in degree apprenticeships probably from 2017. That was quite new to us at CCP, even though I know other organisations were undertaking degree apprenticeships before the levy came in. And it's fair to say there has been a lot of hand holding, especially in those early days, with our that we needed to help us understand how we would really go to market to bring in degree apprentices, typically early careers, but also then how we could use them as a social mobility tool and qualification for some of our existing workforce who never got the opportunity to go to university because they didn't either have that aspiration all that time or the resources and funds to be able to go. So I think for me, you know, degree apprentices have been really, really helpful. They have helped us to, I guess, raise aspiration, but also attract into our organisation those who might have thought, I'm not going to get into Coca-Cola unless I have been to university, and actually I can't afford to go to university.
Thanks, Sharon. That's great. Your connection was almost perfect there, but I might ask you to take your video off if we struggle. So I want to make sure we hear your words. And we said hello to you now. But yeah, let's hope it holds up. Mandy, I want to come to you next to introduce yourself. Lovely to see you.
And you, Olly. So thank you very much for inviting me. Good morning, colleagues. Well, congratulations, Ed, on the release of your latest report in a series of reports looking at this really important aspect of higher education. And degree apprenticeships are very much central to the work of my organisation, the University Vocational Awards Council, or UVAC as we're more commonly known. We are a membership body. We represent the majority of those publicly funded UK institutions that deliver higher end degree apprenticeships in the England market. So we represent around sort of 80 of those institutions, second largest representative body of universities in the UK, probably equal to size of the Council of Deans of Health. I also want to say congratulations, Ed, on your 20th anniversary, because anniversaries are really important in this space. We've got now 10 years, celebrating 10 years of degree apprenticeships. And last year, UVAC celebrated its 25th anniversary, its Silver Jubilee. And in that time, UVAC has been championing higher level technical professional education skills, including higher degree apprenticeships, in recognition of the role that universities play and higher education providers play in delivering skills solutions into the economy. And so it used to be the case that UVAC probably had in its membership more modern bits of the university sector, because typically we were building on the work that they were doing in terms of work-based learning, working with employers around negotiated degree programs. But, you know, from today's standpoint, we've now got some of the foremost universities in the world engaged in degree apprenticeship delivery, and that's been a fantastic development in terms of apprenticeships and its perception amongst young people, parents, and people in work. UVAC really is kind of founded on three purposes, really: advocacy and representation. So we obviously work very closely with government stakeholders to make sure that the system is fit for purpose for universities to engage in. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the history of that engagement in your questions, Olly. We do an awful lot of research too. So it's great to see actually your research adds to the body of knowledge as we kind of recognise that degree apprenticeships as higher education practice and as a field is growing in strength and in traction. So research is very much part and parcel of what we do ourselves. We've just run a series of concept papers in celebration of our 25th anniversary, looking at degree apprenticeships and technical pathways into the professions and progression pathways into higher education, including higher-end degree apprenticeships. And Charlynne was also one of the authors of one of those reports. So I do commend those reports to you. It also kind of speaks to the technical support that we provide our membership. So we are the most authoritative voice on all strategic and operational aspects of higher and degree apprenticeships. And it was the case until more recently, I would say, that UVAC was a lonely voice in the field in terms of defending the position and the growth of higher and degree apprenticeships. So I'm really pleased to be on the panel this morning. So thanks, Olly.
That's great, Mandy. We're happy that we're helping you feel less lonely in that, and we're right behind you. It's great to have you with us. So I'd like to invite all of the researchers who presented to kind of be on screen with us as well. And I'm going to start kind of just drawing out some of the themes with Sharon and Mandy, and probably drawing you in just for a bit of response as well, so we can make it a bit more of a conversation. But Sharon, I wanted to come back to you about this whole issue of that kind of came out of Andrea's presentation around how employers find out about degree apprenticeship. So tell us a little bit about your experience. Like how did you come into this world, and why do you think there are some misconceptions floating around that maybe still are kind of putting some employers off?
So it took us quite a while, and we used a lot of the support from the National Skills Academy for Food and Drink. I'm going to turn my camera off just to save on the bandwidth. So National Skills Academy for Food and Drink were great. They gave us great guidance around degree apprenticeships. So when we were looking at the whole apprenticeship landscape and understanding how could we increase participation, Degree Apprentices was one of those that we looked at. We'd already been doing engineering for many years. But we wanted to find another way from a social mobility and to widen participation, the degree apprenticeships. But if you are not used to the university world and how it all operates, especially with the degrees, you then have to start that navigation of, well, is it the same pathway as if you were going through the traditional route for an apprenticeship, or is there something else that you need to add into the mix? And so by using our network and our bodies that we are part of, they then provided us with that guidance. But even then, it still took probably another 3 years post 2017 for us to then actually start having people going through degree apprenticeships. And that's because as a business, we also needed to understand, well, how does that all fit in? This is, they're 4-year programs. How does that fit into our workforce planning? What are we trying to achieve? Because yes, we want to widen participation, but it's got to be in the right way and for the right reason. Once we'd really gotten ourselves into that positive place, we were then able to go to market to then identify, initially from an early careers, those coming in to do in particular the chartered manager degree, and support them through. And actually there's lots of different elements from all the different reports that I resonate with 5 years ago of people not necessarily being ready. So we now know what we want, but actually, are we set up to be able to give the right level of support? And are we set up to support the transition from somebody potentially just leaving school or college, coming into a big corporate organization, and then still going off to university and having to do their degree studies as well? And it actually was initially a little bit of a car crash, is probably too strong a phrase, but it was very challenging. 5 years down the line, we're in a really good place for us, and degree apprenticeships are working really well. But what we've also then been able to do is to put that offering out to our existing workforce, as I was saying in my introduction, where individuals may not have had that opportunity to go to university, and that they want to aspire, and they see having that degree as that way of raising their aspirations. And so therefore we've had to work with partners who for us will have some of the non-standard entries for degrees as well. And I will come on to this later on, because I think English and maths or functional skills have already kind of been touched on very briefly here. But I think for us as an organisation, and how we've managed the degree apprenticeships is by making sure they absolutely align with the business goal, that we have the right partners who are delivering it, that can then work with us to be able to support not only the apprentice, but the line managers through the whole process as well.
Thanks, Sharon. That's really, really valuable. Your sound's coming through absolutely fine with the screen off. So sorry we can't see you, but we can absolutely hear you. So thank you for making that tweak. I think that what you've said really kind of reinforces some of the points from Andrea's presentation in particular. I'm going to come to Andrea just for a bit of a reflection in just a second. But that point around having a brokerage organisation, in that case a sectoral one, to kind of help you is really valuable. But I guess also some of the challenges for smaller organisations that don't have a Sharon or don't have a brokerage organisation, as you say, is quite a complex area to get into. So Andrea, I don't know if you wanted to come back, as that really felt like it kind of resonated with some of the messages from your presentation.
Yes, absolutely. I think I would pick up Sharon's last point about line manage throughout the process. I think that's really important for all stakeholder groups, thinking about our research report as well. But I mean, clearly it is vital for supporting apprentices. Because as I said in my presentation, it's not sufficient to engage and get on a program, but we really have to support them throughout to complete the program. Because this is the way how employers benefit from having a degree apprentice, and not only taking up resources and time and so on.
Absolutely. We're going to come back to that point about social mobility that you made in a moment, Sharon, and link that to Charlynne's work as well. But Mandy, I wanted to just come back to you about kind of this kind of complex landscape that is education and training, and we can't kind of get around that. We just have to kind of accept it and try and make the best of it. But how do you see degree apprenticeships fitting in with that kind of education and training landscape?
if I have to reflect on that, I mean, I think about my own involvement in apprenticeship policy nationally when in government, and actually my engagement with sort of higher apprenticeships prior to the introduction of degree apprenticeships in 2015 predate the time that we were in government together, Olly, at the start of the apprenticeship reforms and the move towards apprenticeship standards. And I think I want to borrow some of the language from Sharon, which is that degree apprenticeships have really created a changed perception of apprenticeships in England. And because of degree apprenticeships, we've got a very highly aspirational programme that really kind of speaks to apprenticeships for everyone, not for, you know, a good choice for other people's children, which typically perhaps, you know, characterise the apprenticeship system prior to the reforms. I think it's very important, to remember that, when degree apprenticeships were introduced, they really carried quite a weight of expectation amongst lots of different stakeholders, and they were expected, for instance, to meet the economic needs of the economy. If you think about the original purpose of the reforms was around ensuring that apprenticeships contributed to economic success, business competitiveness, productivity. So meeting the needs of employers, absolutely, but also to increase social mobility and diversity in higher education, and to bridge the gap between different levels of qualifications and to create new gateways to the professions, and in effect to imbue a sort of a vocational route to education with prestige accorded to more conventional routes in higher education. And some of that language has continued to kind of characterise higher and degree apprenticeships today. So, I mean, I think for me, apprenticeships, when they were solely a level 2 and level 3 programme, provided a first step or second step on the career ladder. But degree apprenticeships have, in the early days, higher apprenticeships were described as the missing link or the bridge to the professions. And they absolutely provide that ladder to high level and professional occupations and higher paid careers and routes into, quite importantly, into the registered professions. And although the evidence of degree apprenticeships, supporting social mobility are fairly mixed, I think that there is, still evidence to suggest that they are absolutely diversifying the way that some employers recruit. We've heard from the Coca-Cola experience, for example, and looking at potentially, supporting, routes into the skilled professions for underrepresented backgrounds. I think the contribution that they make primarily is sort of recognition of the role of universities in skills. And I think that's a really important one. When I first stepped into the policy agenda way back in sort of, the early sort of coalition government sort of time, the skills agenda was not a central sort of feature or sort of, a part of university life. But there is a real increasing recognition of the role of universities in delivering skills programs. And employers don't care whether it's an FE or an HE program in terms of apprenticeships. They just want a satisfactory skills solution. But I also think that degree apprenticeships help break down this bifurcation that is often part of the discourse and narrative around apprenticeships, which is that, we sometimes look at the skills system as being sort of between academic and vocational, mental versus manual, for example, which are so unhelpful. And of course, degree apprenticeships are not academic or vocational, they're absolutely both. So think about the context in which they're operating today, and clearly we are set to experience some change in policy. But I think actually what we have is programs that already can deliver on this government's sort of priorities. If you think about the industrial strategy and its 5 key missions, and of course the work that the Migration Advisory Committee is expecting apprenticeships to address in terms of supply of of skills for those gaps and shortages. So degree apprenticeships still can turbocharge, I think, the government's policy priorities. So that's where I think that they sit really firmly, and I don't want to see a rolling back of a system that has created an apprenticeship system that speaks to universities and all types of different providers, both colleges and training providers and other HE providers, and that stretches from craft and trade through technical, associate professional, managerial.
Thank you, Mandy. That's really powerful. And you brought us back to that issue of social mobility. So, Charlynne, I wanted to ask you to come in again on that because you raised it as well. And tell us a little bit. You mentioned that kind of social mobility, diversifying your workforce was an aim when you started Degree Apprenticeships. Has that come about? And then, Charlynne, I'll come to you to reflect on how that links with your research as well.
Okay, so I've switched everything off in the hope that the bandwidth will be with us. So I think for us, Olly, we are definitely still on a journey, because I think one of the reports did highlight that, you know, the degree apprentices coming into the workplace from a social mobility probably isn't as high as it had been, you know, the aspiration had been. And again, I think there is this piece around that traditional pathway and varying cultures who do still see an apprenticeship, even if it is a degree, as a lesser qualification to a full-time apprenticeship. And so there is still a lot of work that we are doing from a social mobility, but we are really starting to see the traction now. So we're currently going through our intake for September 2025, and the demographics, you know, those from a multicultural background, those from a lower socioeconomic background, from disability, is starting to increase. We can see the applications going higher from those groups, and that's because we've had to put a real emphasis in our campaigns to target those individuals. And I think there are probably a number of things. Is some people already put their own barrier up to say, well, it's a big global brand, so I'm never going to get the position, so I'm not going to put myself in there. Or if I am going to go into that degree space, then I want to do some of the, you know, the single letter jobs, so accountant, lawyer, etc. You know, or even now with the all of the options within the National Health Service to be able to go into. So we are starting to move the dial, but it is really, really slow. And there is still, I think, a lot more education around that the degree apprenticeships are equal to, and they have parity with the traditional pathway as well. I think the other thing is it's 4 years. So someone says, well, I can go to university for 3 years and then I can start working. But it is that way up that you have 4 years of work experience versus 3 years of debt. You know, that's the simplest equation and the simplest way to be able to put it. And that's the narrative and the message that we are still having to push out there. I think the UCAS work now will really help us. So the fact that they're on the UCAS system, so when you go in to look for a particular degree, it'll bring you the apprenticeship pathway as well as the traditional pathway. And I'm not sure if it did launch, but it's still being, or if it's still being talked about, was the UCAS points, so that you understood your UCAS points from an apprenticeship perspective as well, for some of those level 3 apprenticeships that give you those UCAS points that allow you then to move on to onto a degree. And I think it's very much about, we've got to demonstrate at all stages and all levels that parity, so that we can drive that social mobility a lot quicker and a lot faster. I think one of my concerns, clearly, and it came up earlier in Andrea's, is around then the level 7 proposed reforms and what that might impact, because typically somebody from a lower socioeconomic background or from an underrepresented group is going to go through the degree pathway that then tops up to the level 7. So you can't just get your level 7, especially from an early careers. If we think about the original demographic that the apprenticeship reforms were really aimed and targeted at, well, they can't just go straight to level 7. They have to work through and have to get to the degree level first before they can then do the rest to get them to that level 7 and that fully qualified status. So I think it potentially could, any reforms may have a detrimental impact on social mobility.
Thanks, Sharon. Some really powerful reflections there, I think. And Charlynne, I wanted to bring you in. There's also some really great thoughts in the chat from Victoria. So thank you for putting those in the chat, Victoria. But Charlynne, I wanted to just bring you back in there.
Thanks. Yeah, really interesting, and kind of does reflect some of the kind of experiences we had with the interviews for the research. And the comment that kind of Victoria Geary's put up is yeah, I mean, that's what we were hearing, and that kind of seems to be how kind of some of the situation has appeared. I mean, I think one of the kind of experiences that one of the employer engagement staff in the interviews, kind of an example that they gave us was that they'd been working with a kind of a medium-sized employer who was kind of trying very specifically to get particular kind of women from kind of South Asian backgrounds who were kind of numerous in the local area but hadn't kind of applied for any of their jobs before, and was specifically targeting them to kind of encourage them to apply for degree apprenticeships, and I mean more broadly for kind of jobs and work experience. And kind of because they had that particular kind of focus as an employer, were able to work with the university to kind of think about how that outreach might work, kind of target particular schools, kind of think about other opportunities to enable people to engage and kind of break down some of those barriers. And I think where employers are particularly committed to a kind of particular kind of diversity group, or trying to ensure that their workforce often reflects the local population, that the kind of universities in our experience, and training providers in general, will offer to kind of support and engage, but that was a kind of relatively rare occurrence. And I think one of the challenges is kind of encouraging employers within degree apprentices to think about, as Sharon said, how it fits within your workforce planning, how it kind of relates to your your social responsibility around kind of local area, if it's a small or medium-sized business, or kind of national social mobility. I think one of the challenges within our research here was around widening participation. Traditional or kind of current widening participation definitions from the Office for Students and others doesn't necessarily include mature students and those kind of adults who missed out the first time because of whatever reason. And that was a kind of challenge, because actually from the perspective of kind of non-traditional students, degree apprentices were particularly kind of from an older age group who felt that this was their chance to kind of upskill or kind of aspire to higher level skills, and that's something that we saw that was important. So I'd be loath to lose that. And the paper that I wrote for UVAC and Mandy is very much about adults and apprenticeships.
That's great, Charlynne. Thank you so much. I want to come on to one kind of final theme to pick up, and then we're going to hear from a real degree apprentice, Kofi, who's joined us. Thank you so much for joining us. So Mandy, I wanted to come to you first on this one, but this kind of theme came up a lot in Andrea's presentation, and also in our recent work on T-levels, that there's something in the magic of how the training provider and the employer works together that really kind of powers the apprenticeship relationship. And if we can get that right and have people kind of learning concepts in the classroom, testing them in real life, going back, that can work beautifully. How have you seen that working, and how do you think we can improve that kind of that connection so it really dovetails?
It is happening. I think when you look at the success of degree apprenticeships in terms of their quality, we see that the majority of those universities, for example, who deliver degree apprenticeships are good, with a number increasingly outstanding. And I think degree apprenticeships, for certainly the HE sector, kind of disrupted creatively that relationship between the provider and the employer. And we've seen that in terms of the expansion of the number of standards that are now being delivered, particularly as routes into those professions. And I think where we've really seen a sort of a move in terms of development has been, of course, in public sector occupational areas, and the work, particularly with higher education providers, with public sector organisations like the NHS and police forces, for example. So I think it's really important to kind of remember that, degree apprenticeships are first and foremost a job, like any other apprenticeship, so really important in terms of the design to ensure quality. I'm really pleased that we kind of haven't talked about degree apprenticeships being as an alternative to higher education, because in effect they involve typically a higher education provider, and the same qualification is gained at the end of the apprenticeship programme. So it's really important to remember that, you know, the employers are really key to determining the type of programme as it's constructed and how it's delivered. And I think universities have become more adept at recognising that actually, unlike some of you accuse them of rebadging degrees, typical undergraduate programmes or some postgraduate programmes as degree apprenticeships, that they are basically in effect building the programmes from the ground up and are using the knowledge, skills and behaviours as those learning outcomes. You don't need to map any provision if you're working towards the knowledge, skills and behaviours as detailed in the apprenticeship standard. So I think, you know, for me, what we've got, of course, is, you know, a small but a fast growing, distinct and significant part of higher education provision. Degree apprenticeships were never meant to rival the campus-based, traditional, mainstream, whatever how you want to kind of call it, undergraduate, postgraduate programs, but they are really significant if you think about the way that pedagogy and practice is now evolving around how we deliver work integrated work, you know, work-based programs that really speak to the needs of a particular occupation, sector or industry, or the needs of a particular employer.
That's great, Mandy. Thank you so much. Charlynne, I want to come to you for the kind of employer angle on that, and in particular to ask you about how kind of mentoring and support works in your workplace. Obviously a very different sector to Amy and Claire's, but it would be nice to get that reflection then. Claire, Amy, I'll come back to you for any final thoughts on your side as well. Charlynne.
Yes, so from a mentoring and support, I guess for us it's more blended. Because we have to be realistic about the resource that's available to be able to provide that. So one of the things we have done is, rather than the apprentice having a dedicated mentor, their line manager actually goes through all of the training. They go to the university, they understand what their role is, but they understand the pastoral care that they need to be able to provide, the well-being that is required. But each of the areas then has, I'm going to, in its best way to describe it, a lead specialist on apprenticeships. So you've got an area that you can escalate up to for that additional support. Where mentors typically work for us, and it's slightly different to this context, is more about the career aspiration. So as our degree apprentices are moving into that second, third year, they're really starting to think about, well, when I finish my program, where do I want to progress to? And that's where we're utilizing the mentors more for them, because they feel that they've got sufficient grounding and the support from the line managers based on the work we've done to, I guess, raise their knowledge, their skills and their behaviours to be able to support the apprentice through the degree. And their relationship with the universities has allowed us to kind of almost blend it, because we just don't have the resource to give, in reality, 120 apprentices, everybody having a workplace mentor. So we've had to do it slightly differently.
Thank you, Sharon. That's really valuable. Amy, Claire, just a quick reflection on that, and I'm going to welcome Kofi. Do either of you want to respond? It's like a standoff. Amy.
Yeah, it's obviously it's different in every sector, isn't it? I think you have to take an approach that works for your organisation, whether that is an individual work-based mentor, whether that's a kind of a group team approach. I think you know, whatever works. Ultimately, I think it's recognising that whoever is supporting that apprentice, that it's a vital role, and it really needs you know, that time and preparation. They need to understand their role, and that might be different sectors for what they do, but they need that time to make sure that it's successful. And I think as you said, your mentors already appreciate the fact that there is that pastoral element, and what the mentors were saying is that their role changed and they didn't realize how much it would change. And you obviously mentioned about the employability aspect, and that will come in perhaps as the apprentices progress. And so I think it's that understanding, the mentor understanding that initially it might be about induction, getting somebody you know, settled into an area. Then it's about them understanding the KSBs, and it's about maybe you know, things happen in life, don't they? And you need that pastoral support. You need to know who to signpost to. You need to know who to work with, and then it might be more about you preparing them for the, you know, the qualified role, and that it's about that employability aspect. But the mentor needs to know how to do that, where to go to, and have those resources available to them. And that's where it's not just as training providers or employers doing that we come together to make sure that we're all working together and supporting that mentor. And I think that if they've got that community practice and they've got that chance to learn from each other and share things, particularly in the model where you said, Charlynne, where you've got lots of different people perhaps involved, then that might be a really good way of moving forwards of a community practice.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. Wonderful. Kofi, warm welcome to you. And it's great to have you with us. You're a degree apprentice fire engineer at the UK Parliament. I wanted to just ask you to say a little bit about your journey into your degree apprenticeship to start off. Okay, no problem. Good morning, everyone. I'd very much like to say I'd never really had an experience with degree apprenticeships prior in like my education. Like I went to a grammar school where university was very much championed, so it wasn't something that I very much considered. But first and foremost, having undertaken the degree apprenticeship is something that I'd honestly recommend to anyone. I think it's probably the in the current climate of the UK, is probably the like the most advantageous route that you could probably take. I feel like I'm supported so much through not only work but my education, and I think my perspective on it is a bit is quite unique in the sense where I've actually attended university before I did this degree apprenticeship, so I've very much seen the difference in what you can take. Like when I was at university, the education, like all the education that I was doing, it was very much all under my own responsibility. But since I've undertaken this degree apprenticeship, I say I'm almost attending uni pretty much just as much as I was before. But I've got the support system of the whole work behind me, and the other apprentices that I go to uni with, like because we're all undertaking the same experience together. Like the support system is quite thorough there, so that's what I'd say first and foremost. Yeah. That's brilliant, Kofi. Thank you. One of the themes we've been talking about is how kind of degree apprentices get support in the workplace, and that's some of the work that Claire and Amy have been doing. Do you want to say a little bit about how that works for you? Do you have a line manager, a mentor, people around you that kind of support you in your work? So yes, I have a line manager. I work quite closely with my line manager actually. So the first because when you first join, you're not expected to have any experience in what you're saying and in what you're doing. So it's very much there's not an initial pressure to perform. It's more of a shadowing process. If anything is on your line manager to bed you in and get you there and get you up to level as much as possible. I've seen some questions in the chat. Should I answer it? Yeah, by all means, Kofi. Yeah, I think Victoria was interested in how you applied for the role and how you found that process. Okay, so how I applied for the role is actually quite interesting because I've seen Anne here has put that UTCs are quite championed, and I did go to a UTC college for sixth form. I went to UTC sixth form college. So whilst I was at university, I had to take a year out for medical reasons, and during that year out, like I was seeing some of my friends graduate, and they were kind of struggling to find jobs. So like when my experience at the UTC, where although I didn't undertake an apprenticeship, it was I very much saw the advantages of it. Like that there were people from apprenticeships that came and joined to the school. So I always had it in my mind that that's a way that could go, because like I feel like just the value of having a job is worth a lot nowadays. So that's almost invaluable. So that's how I knew about it. But I actually just looked on the government website. That's what I'd recommend to anyone if they're looking, if they're undergoing to look for an apprenticeship. If you go look on the government website, you can put what level that you're looking at. So because I already had A levels, I could go from a level 6
But if you don't have those, or you're only looking for, you can go from level 3, level 2, all the way up to a level 7, and then they're all listed on the website, and then the answers are there. This one took me to a direct link to the Parliament website, but some of them you can apply straight through the government website.
That's brilliant, Kofi. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you one final question, just a second, which is just about kind of what advice you might give to somebody who's thinking about a degree apprenticeship. And then I'm going to come, Mandy and Sharon, back to you just for one final kind of thought about how you might like the system to change. So just kind of giving you the heads up, and then we'll bring things to a close. So Kofi, yeah, what advice would you give to maybe somebody who's in sixth form now, maybe thinking about a degree apprenticeship?
What I would say advice for someone giving a degree apprenticeship is one, just don't feel shy about applying for literally anything, communicating with anyone. Like, your network is worth its weight in gold. So like, just communicating with anyone can really get you anywhere. I'd say like during the application process, I think the main thing that you just have to outline is that like, an apprenticeship is really just the opportunity to learn and progress in the field that someone's essentially bringing you through. So you just got to show that your ability and willingness to learn, and I feel like that can just bring you through and then you can gain your professionalism. But it's a professional environment that you're trying to bring yourself through. So if you just come with that attitude, you can really go far. So that's what I'd say.
Brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Kofi. Sharon, your thoughts on kind of where you'd like the programme to go next, or a little...
So less about the programme. We touched on it really briefly, functional skills. So I flagged I'm coming off camera because my bandwidth's going down again. I flagged with Jackie Smith when we did the most recent APPG on apprenticeships that, you know, I could go to university without English and maths if I went the traditional pathway. So if we want real parity, then we need to really think about, and there's a whole bigger debate than the time we've got for this, how English and maths then fits into being an exit pathway for the apprenticeship. And I think that that's one of the biggest changes that we really need to look at when we look at degree apprenticeships. And I'd like them to really think about what they do with level 7, because, you know, Kofi's talked about the fact that he's seen his friends graduating, but he absolutely recognised that the degree apprenticeship pathway was the route that he wanted to take, and he touched on the economic situation currently. So as I said earlier, do I want to have 4 years of work experience and be earning, or 3 years at traditional university and have the debt?
Thank you, Sharon. And time for a very pithy final thought from Mandy.
Well, I already said, rather than describing them as a novel, which I think your report describes them as in the opening sort of chapters, they are a brilliant UK invention, and we are exporting that invention to other nations. So we don't want to lose that. And I think we've touched a little bit about the policy moves against level 7. Government are not saying that they won't recognise them as being government approved, but actually they won't be funded inside the levy. That's very retrogressive move, I think. Currently, there are too few degree apprenticeship opportunities, and Victoria makes a very good point, actually. Ironically, some underserved cohorts have got more chance of getting into university than getting onto a degree apprenticeship, so that can't be right. Good that this government has actually maintained the Office for Students Competitive Fund to grow, for example, degree apprenticeship opportunities, for example, but we really need to think about a plan for growth in degree apprenticeships. And this is about actually, you know, what is the purpose of apprenticeship? So getting clarification from this government as to what its purpose. Are we rolling back to it being a programme about NEET and those disengaged from education and employment and training opportunities? Or is it about productivity first? That's what I want to kind of see going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mandy. Wonderful. Well, we've come to time. That was brilliant. Thank you so much to our researchers. Congratulations on the publication of all those 3 pieces, and huge thanks to our panelists as well. We hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. We'll put the video of this and an article with some of the key points on our website very soon, and we'll look forward to seeing you at another event as well. Thank you. Have a really good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.